Welcome to week 3, Writing with Machines. So this week we're talking about how writing has gone from something by hand and eventually by typewriter into machines writing for us. And that journey from digitization to collaboration, kind of began in the mid 20th century when we saw industries transition from typewriters to the first word processors. That was a big change. By the late 1990s, depending on how old you are, saw the rise of reactive tools like spell check and basic grammar assistants like in Microsoft Word that functioned as basic digital editors, catching errors after they're made. Another kind of machine writing type of thing. But when we entered the generative AI realm with large language models, that was really the era of machines becoming active writing partners. So we've moved beyond writing on machines to writing with them. LLMs, as we talked about last week, are large language models, and those are used for writing. They're trained on large databases of text to learn patterns in language. So if you're given a prompt to a LLM, they predict what comes next, token by token. Again, they're predicting what comes next, word by word or chunk of text by chunk of text. They're predicting every consecutive piece of text. And that simple objective over time produces really complex behavior, creates summaries, copy, press releases, dialogue, scripts, and then also writing with a certain style involved or writing in certain genres. So those are all the advantages that LLMs have. And again, they're good at long form writing and instruction following. Then they're flexible with their prompts. But the trade-offs we talked about before, again, can take a while to really generate really large amounts of outputs. The hallucinate that we talked about in terms of facts aren't always accurate. Some information can be not what you wanted, so there's hallucinations. And then sometimes they don't lock in the format. You might ask for a 3-paragraph summary of something and it gives you 5 paragraphs or a couple sentences. Didn't listen to you or didn't follow the prompt. So those are all kind of trade-offs that we see. But LLMs are good at a lot of things. I think one of the biggest things is that they can speed up your work and they're really good at helping you brainstorm ideas. I think that's always something that I really like about it. And part of the brainstorming for me is things like shifting perspective. Maybe I would ask the AI to rewrite my proposal from the perspective of a skeptical 60-year-old donor or by a 25-year-old tech enthusiast. So I'm telling it to change the audience and see how the writing changes on that. That's really powerful. Also, the idea of brainstorming with idea iteration. You can have it generate 50 bad ideas to eventually find the one spark, the one great idea that you want, that you need to uncover. And because of that, I think they're one of the best tools ever invented for overcoming writer's block. Other things they're good at, rapid outlining. So if you have a whole messy list of notes, they can put it into logical, hierarchical structure for a presentation or report. They're good at drafting standardized content. So for example, you have some basic copy and you want to create meeting summaries from it and email templates and product descriptions from that same content. It can draft all those things out. It's also good at multi-formats. So taking a long form article and reframing it into social media post or a script for a 60-second video or a formal executive summary. So those might sound the same, but again, standardized content would have a very similarity between everything it's put into. Multi-form adaptation would be changing it given what the format it is. When given the right prompt, they can also assist in style and tone and even writing in genres. You might want to write horror fiction, or you might want to write, kind of a detective noir type of thing. It's good at all those things. But like any software or hardware, you need to be careful. And the most famous risk that LLMs are known for is they're not fact checkers. They are probability engines. They're probably trying to predict what the next piece of content should go after the one that was there already. But they're not checking their facts. And so LLMs often invent information. We've talked about this as hallucinations. That can be anything from a false citation, incorrect historical dates. There's been issues in the legal profession about there'll be case law or legal precedents that don't exist, and the LLM says it does. So it's always really important to be able to fact check your stuff. Again, another thing is the generic voice, that LLMs are predicting the most likely next word based on their database. So they tend to gravitate towards the mathematical middle, which is very generic. So your writing can end up sounding kind of AI-ish, maybe repetitive, overly polite, devoid of humor, perspective that makes a human author memorable. For example, a couple things you'll always see in like AI text is the EM dash used way too much, or sentences that have three things at the end of it, blank, blank, and blank on continuous sentences. So there are things that you can see sometimes in AI writing that kind of call itself out. And these are part of the things that are some of the risks with working with a large language model. I'm not going to delve too deeply into the underlying technology of LLMs, but I think knowing how they work matters a bit. So let's kind of talk about, again, LLMs are predicting the next word over and over and over of what they're doing and everything. And so you might ask something like the prompt, in the next scene, the hero opens the door and sees. So to an LLM, these words are the context. They look at this sentence and say, they don't look at the world. They don't have a vision of what the movie is. They only look at the mathematical relationship between these specific words based on the billions of sentences it's already read during training. And they come up with probabilities. So the probabilities for the next word are simplified in AI. The P basically stands for probability. And so in this case here, there's an 18% chance the next word could be an A. There is a 14% chance the next word could be a the. There is a 9% chance the next word could be someone, and a 10% chance the word could be nothing. It could be other things as well, but that's just the probability distribution. They'll probably go with the word that has the greatest probability. Now, again, the model isn't thinking about storytelling or the hero's journey. It's literally calculating what the character, what would statistically be most likely to follow the word sees. So in this one, it would be and then we have to figure out the word after that. That's what they see it being, type of thing. So what does that mean? What that means is LLMs don't have a plan. They don't plan out the whole story. You know the ending before you finish the first chapter of your book in a lot of cases, or your article. AI does not. Essentially, if you ever played the game of Mad Libs, it's what it is. It's that constantly fill in the blank over and over into infinity. Picks one word, and then adds a word to the context and calculates the next word and repeats that loop over and over until it gets the stop, until it knows it's done. So they're constantly making the best next step guess at a time-based issue on the context that they have, on the probability. So that's how LLMs work. But when I say that, don't be afraid of them, because they're incredibly valuable. They're not the solution to every writing problem you have, but they are really useful. And they don't replace writing, but they help replace some of the blank page, writer's block issues you might have. Like in a brainstorming, coming up with log lines, themes, metaphors, and titles types of stuff. But the real skill shift is in editorial. It can really help you outline, draft, and revise your copy. And that can be, selecting a direction, being coherent, preserving the style or voice of what you want to do there. It can be really helpful in those things. It also, I'd emphasize that the critique mode is really important. With each of these kind of phases here, brainstorm, outline, draft, and revise, critiquing each stage is really important. So you can ask the learned language model to diagnose clarity or grammar or style issues that can help you in drafting. Sometimes you'll find like verb text gets out of whack, or maybe a character starts talking differently than they did before. You can have your LLM diagnose for those types of things. The biggest thing I think is with the LLMs is finding a balance. I think of it as building a house. So, use AI to put up the bricks and the mortar and the roof and things like that. But you built the architectural plan. You're telling us where the walls go, how many rooms there are, what the view is. You're telling that. So you're the architect, but you might use AI as the builder. So some examples on that one. So authenticity. AI mimics. It can only mimic patterns of experience from their data. You have lived experience. That's much more valuable for the writing thing. For fact checking, constantly checking. We mentioned that AI can hallucinate. So you have to provide the final truth step, verifying what it has in there, doing your own research. Verification on facts is critical. Scale and speed. AI is faster than humans. It can generate 50 variations really quickly. And that's a big advantage that we have, is those iterations. Taste and curation is something that only humans have. AI thinks everything is great. They have equal amount of confidence on everything it creates. As humans, we know what is good and what isn't good. And that's the big value that we have. Prompts. Been kind of previewing this for a couple weeks. Let's dive into prompts and how to write a good prompt. So a prompt is taking us into direction, creative direction. We're not just finding information like we might on Google. We're actually directing a machine to do something, directing the intelligence. So we are programming it using our own language. And the prompt is just that. It's the interface between your creative vision and the machine's massive database of patterns. And that's a big difference. Because if we think about when we used to use, or we still use Google, or keywords, we're basically just typing on, Colorado State Rams and seeing what comes up, type of thing. But in this world, with prompts, we're basically coming up with context, what we want specifically, and the intent of how we want it to be used, which is a big thing. So the key concept is, when we're talking about coming up with this context and intent, we also want to give it guardrails or boundaries on what they're doing. So much like the architectural thing, we're telling the AI how many rooms, how big the rooms are, what the view is, how high is the ceiling, things like that. We're giving, because the machine doesn't know. You tell it a house, it's just going to build a random house. We need to define what that house or that room is for writing. So if you tell AI to write a story, AI will usually take the easiest, most cliched path right down the middle. But when you add boundaries to it, and maybe you set it in 1920s Paris, and you're using a kind of a detective noir style, and you don't want to talk about the weather, you're literally building the walls of that room. You're narrowing the statistical map, so AI's probability engine only looks at the words that fit inside those specific walls. A little bit more about Google versus prompts. One way I look at it is in terms of roles. We can think of Google as kind of a librarian, finds the best books on the shelves, hands them to you, and you still have to read them and write the report. Prompting is like the executive assistant. It reads the books for you, it summarizes the key points, it drafts the report in your specific voice. And that's huge. Search is kind of a one-way street. If the first page doesn't have the information you want on it, you can change the keywords and start over, but that's kind of what it is. Prompting is two ways. So if you don't like the original output, you can customize it. You can say, I like point 2, but make it more aggressive. Keep that structure, but rewrite it for a LinkedIn post. You can constantly customize your output. Can't do that with Google. Google's just giving you a list of links to check. So again, prompts allow you to create what doesn't exist yet versus Google, which is just showing you what's already out there. Remember, AI doesn't guess what you want. It responds to the prompt, the context, the constraints you're providing it. So the more information you give it, the better. So if you're acting like a director or an architect, you're guiding that machine into the output you want. So a good prompt is clear, has context, has constraints. You're going to better output. Remember that kind of term, garbage in, garbage out, you used to hear with software programs? It's the same thing with prompts. If you give a vague, incomplete, or generic or messy output, you're going to get lousy kind of content coming out. Prompts are a learned skill, and they're a really important creative skill to use in your work. A good prompt, think of a lot of things on that. This list is some of the ones that I look for in a good prompt. It's specific, you're clear on what you need. It's contextual, it includes background information. It's audience aware, it gives you your target audience and who the content is for. Structured, it tells you the length, the format, the details, how it should be laid out, all that kind of stuff. Gives you the tone and brand style so it comes out in your voice. And it's outcome focused, what the content should do or be or things like that. That's a good prompt. Now compare that to a bad prompt. This is where you get that low quality kind of garbage or that AI slop we hear about. It's missing details. It's vague. It doesn't tell you the audience. It doesn't give you the creative direction. There's no tone, content, or style. Or it's literally such a short sentence, it's hard for it to be meaningful for AI and generative AI to really figure out what you want. So a bad prompt would be something like this. Write something about our new museum exhibition. What's something? So that's the whole issue there. Something offers zero direction. There's no platform, there's no tone, there's no purpose. And then what's AI going to do? It's going to fill in the gaps with generic fluff. What that means then is you're going to have to spend more fixing and more time than if you wrote it yourself, trying to fix the prompt and get to the place that you want. So always work with the best prompts possible, and I'm here to help. So good prompts, like I mentioned, are like good creative direction. So when I think of a prompt failure that didn't work, it's kind of a creative brief failure, that the creative brief didn't have enough information for an artist or a writer, or in this case, a machine, to really come up with good output. So all of you at some level know how to direct creatives, direct collaborators. Treat AI as a model of a junior collaborator that needs very specific instruction. And here are the 5 things that a good prompt always needs. The task or the goal, what you want and why you want it, the audience, who it's for, the context, any facts or reference material or examples you want it to riff off of, the constraints or guardrails, what it should not do, and then the format, the exact structure and length. All those are purposes. Again, AI, generative AI, the models cannot read your mind. It can only read your prompt. So make sure your brief is clear and specific. And one of the things I always say, if you don't like the first results, the first output of your prompt, improve your prompt, improve your brief first. Make sure you're asking for something that is clear and specific so that you can get good output on that. This is one of the templates that I use, and I'm happy to post this as an announcement if people are interested on this. It's just a way to kind of use over and over again if you're struggling with what your prompt should say. Copy and paste something like that. Basically the role, which basically sets the voice and criteria. When you assign a role, you're not just giving the AI a title, you're forcing it to prioritize a specific subset of its training data. So for example, a graphic designer might define quality, will focus on hierarchy and visual balance, while a project manager defining quality might focus on deadlines and budget constraints. So really defining what the role is that you have, that'll help your prompt. The next is task. You got to clarify what is being done, and that'll prevent the AI from rambling. Be very specific with the task. And that's the difference between getting a generic average response and getting a professional grade output that actually does your work. Context, we talked about this. It reduces the guessing and hallucination. Paste examples, paste the scene, notes, facts you want to use, any information you can give the AI to basically help it understand what you want. Talked about constraints before. Again, those are the guardrails of your prompt. Without those, an AI will naturally drift towards the most generic outputs. Those are the most statistically common and often most boring responses based on its training data. So make sure you provide constraints. And then format. You want to define what the container is, so you force the AI probability engine to work backwards. If it's 300 words, it knows it has to be 300 words before it figures out what the words are going to be. You give it structure. You prevent structural drift on it. That's going to increase the accuracy and improve the content as well. So those things are all super valuable. And this is just one. I would come up with 3 to 5 templates that you love, save them on a Word doc or on Notepad or something like that. So you can copy and paste them every time and just fill in the blanks of certain words you need to change. That'll really help your prompting skills. So an example. One of the things that helps in prompts, will help the consistency of your output, is providing examples in your prompts. That'll push the AI models away from cliches. So for creative writing, you want to be very specific and give examples versus saying, make it more emotional. Or maybe for a scriptwriter, make it cinematic. AI really doesn't know what to do with that. Locking in examples helps lock in the voice and format faster than any adjective alone. It also reduces creative misinterpretation of your brief. You're teaching the model what good looks like, because again, AI doesn't know what good and bad looks like. So you have to teach it what a good example is and a bad example is, and that will help your prompts as well. The most common, I think, mistake I see with generative AI is seeing AI is like a vending machine. You put a coin in or you put $1 in and you get your Snickers bar. So you get one piece of information in and you get one product out. You can't look at it that way. It's a loop. You want to look at it as a collaborator, as a writing partner that goes through. So you're going to draft, critique, revise, and polish, and you repeat steps 2 and 3, especially over and over until you're happy with what the result is. That's what a writing partner is. This is the core of co-authoring workflow. Don't ask for a perfect result on the very first prompt. It's not going to happen. So if we look at these a little more detailed, the draft mode, it's just generative. You're just trying to get a whole bunch of content out to look at. Then critiquing is evaluative. You're picking which ones you like the best. Then revision mode might be narrowing it down, changing some things, adding some constraints or guardrails to kind of send it in a certain direction. And then you'd polish from there. Most important though, don't change the scope of your prompt. If you're adding new plot points or wanting more paragraphs or doing other stuff, that's going to cause a runaway rewrite. The content's going to go in another direction totally. You want to keep it small and nimble so you can get what you want on that type of thing. So a critique prompt, if you're at the critique level, the prompt might be this: act as a tough editor, list 5 issues of clarity, style, pacing, and then propose concrete fixes for those. That might be a prompt you use in the critique section. And then for the revision section, you might use this type of prompt. Revise using only the fixes above. Keep voice consistent. Do not add new plot points. Those are specific prompts for certain phases of the co-writing with an LLM. I also think people get stuck in the ideas like, all right, I'm working with an LLM. I love ChatGPT, so I do all my writing with ChatGPT. I would not be married to that. The idea is every LLM out there has different skills. I happen to think that Grok and Gemini do a much better job in more natural and less business-sounding language. So it's okay to experiment. What matters is documenting the process and choosing deliberately. So you might want to use multiple LLMs on a writing project. You might pick ChatGPT to do your brainstorming, gives you lots of variations. Then you take some of those variations and give it to Gemini. and do a structure and a rewrite with constraints and do there. And then you might give it to Claude or Grok to do a critique and be a harsh editor and maybe have rubrics assigned to what's good or down. But using all the different models is just fine. At the end, you're the creative director, you're the architect. The final decisions and accountability to the content comes down to you. So take advantage of different LLMs that might give you different results. The final thing I want to hit on this is just mistakes happen. And there are ways that LLMs normalize mistakes, and sometimes you don't realize it. Every model will hallucinate. But our job is to design workflows that catch issues in advance. So let's go through some of the common failures of an LLM and how we might fix it. So for hallucinations, use a critical path idea. So the more important the information, the higher the stakes, the more verification you need. So ask it to provide sources or to be able to label the uncertainty of things it's not completely locked in on. For style drift, where the voice changes midway, either in terms of verb tense or just how the writer is maybe talking or whatever, the character is talking. Lots of issues like that. So lock it in. Give the LLM a short style example, and that kind of states the tone and style you want to use. Then you probably want to refresh that style after every 5 to 10 messages to make sure it just stays locked in and stays consistent on that. For structure drift, it ignores your format. It does something different. Use templates, or again, be specific. Say it must have 5 bullets, or it must have 10 paragraphs. Those things are very important. So templates, headings, specs, whatever. For generic output we talked about, where it's just kind of bland or whatever, require it to have more constraints, be more specific, maybe do multiple iterations, maybe force it to take unusual style choices to see what you get. There's all sorts of things that you can do on that. So that can help you on that one. And the final one, over citation or fake citation. Again, make the LLM require it to use real URLs for your reviewed. And then, or provide your own sources and upload them and have them use those sources. All those things will work, but some common failures with LLMs and how you can fix them. Okay, that's a pretty good overview there. This week, no discussion, but we do have our first workshop, kind of a larger assignment, and this is a chance for you to really explore what it means to co-write with generative AI models. So what you're going to do is you're going to use an LLM such as ChatGPT, Claude, or one of the writing kind of LLMs like Sudowrite to generate a short piece of text that's either creative or professional context. And in the workshop on Canvas, you'll see I provide a variety of LLMs for you to choose from as the ones that you want to co-author with, but you're free to choose your own if there's other ones that you like. But the idea is that you're basically going to create a short text piece with a writing tool of your choice. There's three different options that are again laid out in Canvas. One is basically a creative writing option, which can be a poem, dialogue between two characters, or maybe a descriptive paragraph about a fictional place like a gallery or a stage or a world. That's option one of those three. You could do a professional organizational writing, which could be things like a mission statement or fundraising email for an arts nonprofit, or 3 social media captions promoting a creative event or product, or a brand guide, a tone or voice guide for a fictional arts organization. So you're basically going to go between one of those two, either option A, creative writing, or option B, professional organizational writing. And that's your workshop for this week, and that is a wrap up on week 3, Writing with Machines.